Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And I too will have to go back and watch Babe, some leadership lessons that hopefully I can add to that. So let me just share my screen here with you. Okay, are you able to see it, Eric?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, fantastic. So today we're going to talk about how to become the leader you seek. And I will share with you some of the leadership framework from the US Army, which is be, know, and do. So I spent 7 years in the US Army. I was stationed at Shape, Belgium and at the Pentagon. And my most greatest blessing was serving under General John R. Galvin. He is my hero, and I served for him directly for almost 5 years at NATO. General Galvin had a personal staff of about 100 or over 100. He had people driving hard cars. He had, hard cars. He had helicopters. He had a C-9, C-141. He had 5 speechwriters and security personnel, schedulers, a full admin staff, cooks, a full staff out of the chateau. So there were a lot of us. But General Galvin always took the time, and every single one of us in his staff would have done anything for him. So what I learned about General Galvin helped shape my career and my life. And so I'd like to share a story about him with you. So relationships meant a lot to General Galvin. Regardless of one's status, from dignitary or enlisted soldier, he always invested time in getting to know the people around him. When soldiers who had served under him would call, General Galvin would always call back, if even for 5 minutes, to congratulate them and just see how they were doing. At General Galvin's request, we would often prepare personal profiles of the people whom he would be meeting with. And when he would greet his visitors, he would use those profiles, and he would ask about their spouses or their children, and he would call them by name. So as his personal assistant, I sat out in front of outside of his office, and I would do a lot of administrative and protocol and international dignitary kind of things. And over the course of almost 5 years, I prepared or transcribed literally thousands of letters from General Galvin during his tenure as the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. Now, he had underneath him, under his command, he had all of the NATO forces and then all of the US European Command. And we served there during a very pivotal time in history. It was during when the Berlin Wall crashed, the Soviet Union collapsed, the reunification of Germany, the first Iraq War, the Yugoslavian War. So there was a lot going on back then. And so there were lots of letters that were coming in, and many of these letters that were standard, and they would be just for affairs like birthdays or anniversaries. But I also transcribed a lot from his voice recorder, and where he just wanted to let someone know that he was thinking about him, or share something that had crossed his mind, or give a word of encouragement. Now, we mostly signed General Galvin's letters using what we called the iron hand, which was a mechanical device that was in his back office. And we would prepare the letters and slide it under the mechanical device, push the pedal, and it would beautifully sign his name. And then we would give the letter to General Galvin, and he would write something personal on the top of it. So one day, and it was about 1990, and General Galvin was to meet a military leader, a 4-star general, a chief of the defense staff, from the Soviet Union. And they had been negotiating the ending of the Cold War for a couple of years. As part of that was General Colin Powell, who was General Galvin's boss, and then of course the first President Bush at the time. And so General Galvin had previously met this general, his name was General Shevardnadze, at a peace summit, but it was the general's first time to NATO. And so shortly before the meeting, General Galvin appeared before my desk, and he asked me a question about the general's son. And apparently this general had told General Galvin something about his son at the summit. And I looked around for General Galvin's speechwriters or military protocol people, and everybody was out to lunch. And so General Galvin was getting a little anxious. And so I said to him, well, sir, it's probably not that important anyway. I'm sure this general, he's not expecting you that you would remember that type of information, those kinds of details. And General Galvin looked right at me, and he said firmly, but not sternly, Teresa, it's important to me. I said, yes, sir, I'll have that information for you in 10 minutes, sir. So that day, General Galvin taught me the importance of personal integrity. Know who you are and what's important to you. then hold yourself to that standard. Take notice and make kind gestures, not because of what other people will think of you, who cares, but because what you will think of yourself. Thank you, General Galvin. I salute you, sir. General Galvin passed away 5 years ago, and he wrote in his memoir there, The Fighting the Cold War. It's a beautiful story about his life and his leadership. He spent 42 years serving his country. The last part of his book, he says, we are the inhabitants of a changing world that will continue to surprise us in all kinds of ways. There is one aspect, however, that we can depend on, change itself. Our survival in the long run will depend on our recognition of this simple but powerful understanding that we need a global perspective. And boy, isn't that fitting in today's age as well, with the pandemic and the global economy and just the elections and and even in our own industry, sending titles and distributing those, preparing them for local audiences and sending them worldwide. So it's just as much true today as it was back then. So let's talk a bit about leadership. The Army's definition of leadership is influencing people by providing purpose, direction, motivation, while operating to accomplish the mission and organizing or improving the organization. I kind of like Dwight David Eisenhower's definition. He was the 34th president, and he also was the first Supreme Allied Commander, which was the same position that General Galvin held. He was the first one after the end of World War II, when NATO was formed. And President Eisenhower said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it, he or she wants to do it. And so General Eisenhower knew a thing or two about influence. A lot of people think the military is about command and control, about, people will follow orders regardless of what kind of a leader you are. And that's not exactly true. It's almost all training about how you get people to do what you want them to do, how you coalesce your troops, how you find the skills and talent of people and you train them and you bring the best out of them. You align them, you organize and mobilize and you execute according to a plan. But in all of that, your team members feel like it's their mission too. They take ownership in it and they want to do good for themselves and they also want to do good for you. When I got out of the service after 7 years, a lot of people asked me, boy, are you going to have a hard time not following orders or not knowing what to do? You get told what to eat, what to dress, what to do. And I thought, no, not at all. I can't wait. But in fact, I did have a bit of an adjustment. And that adjustment was because the civilians didn't know how to act. It's about personal responsibility. You don't realize with the military that they train us from day one to be leaders. Not everybody is a leader, but we're leaders in training. And they teach you personal responsibility. And so when everyone is held to that account, it just makes things a lot easier. People work together, they're transparent, they work hard, they're dedicated to the mission. And so that was the adjustment for me, is that we're all different and unique. And so over the years, I've tried to apply what I've learned in the Army's framework, Be, Know, Do. It's a very simple but elegant framework. And I'd like to share it with you today and provide context and how I've applied it in the corporate world over my career, and hope that'll help provide some insights to you as well. So the leadership framework is Be, Know, Do. And you see I put it in a triangle because the B is a foundation. It's about your character and your values. And so your character is what drives who you are and able to have values and hold true to those values. Knowing is the competence that links the doing or the action. And the action, again, is about influencing others or doing others. But again, it all is about the core. Without the core, you lose your way. You don't know who you are. You don't know what you stand for. And day to day, when you have to make decisions, when you have to build your teams, when you have to, hold people accountable or hold yourself accountable, you don't know what the boundaries are. And so that's why as a foundation, B is the first part of it. And we'll talk about that. In contrast, on the corporate side, I think it's a lot about productivity, people, and purpose. In my career, at least, there is no foundation. Generally, bosses and leaders have either been about business outcome and productivity, people who've come out of the top B schools, perhaps, and they've had training to say it's all about business outcome at the expense of everything else. I've also had managers and bosses, I'm sure you have too, who are just great people. You know, they're just, you know, they might not be, they're laid back and they really care about their teams. And then there are those that are purpose-driven. They're very mission-driven and they have a high degree of conviction. But in the corporate life, there's nothing that trains us. There's skills around how to be a manager, how to do better budgeting and staffing and planning and those kinds of things. But there isn't leadership training. And so I'm super excited about the LDF and what Eric's done, as well as the steering committee and Mark, because we want to be able to provide people in our industry a path for leadership and how to advance their careers. So let's talk about the first one, be self-aware. So there's 4 C's of leadership. The first 3 have to do with being: character, courage, and conviction. And your character is about having the inner strength so that you have the courage to do the right thing around conviction. Conviction to me is about saying things with authority, and I'm pretty good at that. Ask my team. And it's, you know, it's something that you learn, and you have to believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing and you second guess yourself all the time, your team's not going to believe in you either. And so you have to speak with authority. You have to understand who you are and where you're going. And then you got to be mindful enough and be self-aware enough to change the direction or make new decisions or come back and apologize and get things right. But important is the character, courage, and conviction. Second is core values. So core values are really important for 2 reasons. One is that it helps you understand where you want to work. So as you know, in our industry, you can pick a company, and whether it's, you know, any studio or a post house or Amazon, Netflix, Google, YouTube, any of the companies, Apple, and they all have very pronounced character, right? And very pronounced culture. And so you want to make sure that you align yourself with a company that aligns with your own values. For instance, if you like working on your own, you probably don't want to be in a culture or a company where there's a 360 review and everybody has line item veto authority and you feel like you're never good enough, right? So knowing core values and what's important will help you select the right fit for you when going into a company. But secondly, as you go through your career, it helps you know boundaries. You know, careers and work, those who've been around a while will tell you that it's not black and white. I used to think it was coming out of the military. There was a regulation for everything. I thought there was an answer. It was black or it was white. It was right or it was wrong. And boy, did I learn. Sometimes I made good decisions and things worked out okay. Other times I fell on my sword thinking I was right and it didn't work out okay. What I learned over time is it's not about right or wrong. It's about perspective. It's about observation. So if you can take a step back from who you are, and if you are self-aware, you can start to look at yourself in these conversations and discussions, and you can start to see, okay, that guy here, he's like, this isn't fair, he's giving me a hard time. But you can observe that, and you don't have to react to it, and you can better manage yourself. So we all have strengths and weaknesses, and our goal as leaders and senior managers and just coming up is to reflect, not project. One of my Achilles heel, my biggest vulnerability is is perfection. So perfection gets me. And even now in the coronavirus where we're working from home, you know, it's gotten worse and I have to check it every single day, because how many of you think, oh, I'll just do it myself. It's faster if I just do it myself. Well, if you have a big team or you're leading an organization, before you know it, you're doing everything yourself. And then you get frustrated because your team's not helping, but you haven't given them the direction or the guidance to help you. And so by the time you do delegate, you're already frustrated. So that's something we all have to be mindful of. What is our vulnerability? Early in my career, I had a team member who was working on a project, and I always worked late, and he was working late. And I was expecting him to give me a draft of a document, and he was late in getting it to me, and I kept saying, when are you going to turn that in? Let's review it, let's review it. And he did, and I reviewed it and gave it back, and he did, and I reviewed it and gave it back. And then this one night, he comes in, and I said, you know, I'll call him Sam. I said, you know, Sam, what's the deal here? You know, we've looked at this thing several times. And he came in, and the poor guy was shaking, and he said, you know what? I'm just not good enough for you. He said, every time I come in here, you're taking out your red pen and you're redoing it. And I just sat there and my heart sank because this guy was a lot younger than I was. And he was almost ready to fall apart. And he had been trying so hard to please me and it was never good enough. And that was a moment that I just stopped and thought, you know what? My perfection is my problem. It's my issue. It's my baggage. It's not his. And I've learned over time that your people are good enough. As long as you can help them, give them the tools and the training and help them perform their personal best, that's all you can expect of them. And that's all you can expect of yourself. It's important to define success for you. Don't worry about what other people think. Our careers in life is not an escalator. You can get off at any time and you can step over and you can get back on. So don't worry about that. The biggest thing I see with young people sometimes is that they're impatient with themselves. They look at their peers or they look at what their parents think and how many years they've been doing their job or how many years out of school or how old they are, how long they've been in position, how much money they make, and they place so much pressure on themselves to continue to climb that ladder and excel and perform. And so I would advise people, younger folks and more junior folks, just to take a deep breath and exhale and know that this is your life. Design success for you and have it be based on your core values. There are always opportunities for tomorrow. General Galvin used to tell me, true leaders don't attract more followers. True leaders create more leaders. And so he would say that people don't follow you because of you. So don't be so proud of yourself. People follow you because of your vision. And he would say that, I would hear him say that to a lot of people around, not just me, but a lot of people around. And so I've tried to do that. When I look back at my career and I think about all the people that have served with me in companies and whatnot, and I'm so proud of what they've done and where they've gone and what they do. And so you should always seek to help people become better leaders. You know, we've all had bosses, the boss where they break their arm with patting themselves on the back. So you don't want to be that leader. So the next thing is know. Know again is about competency. So it complements the other 3 C's of character, courage, and conviction. Competency breeds confidence. You have to be ready. You have to be trained. So in the military, we're always training. It was so boring a lot of times. We would have to do, take apart our M16s in training, take apart our M16s and clean it, put it back together with blindfolds. We'd have to races on taking off your NBC gear, your nuclear, biological, chemical warfare gear, and putting it back on and see who could do it the fastest. But we were always training. And that's the same thing that goes with firefighters and police and everybody. So I would encourage all of us to do that as well. You have to use your time wisely. If you're focused on the fundamentals and the basic, you don't have no time to learn. You have no time to grow. So one of my things early on was I had a kind of my own standard, which was I wanted to learn everybody else's job and I wanted to turn the lights off. And so what that meant was I really tried to understand how the pieces fit the whole. And none of our roles are independent and none of us work in isolation. And if we take the time to understand how what we do affects somebody else on our team, it helps us be more compassionate. It helps us make sure that we deliver on time and we deliver within budget and we communicate clearly, right? So, what you want to do is make sure that you work hard, that you support your team, and that you know what everybody's job is. Know your strengths. Hire up. Hire people who are smarter than you. Know that every person on your team can contribute positively, and your job as a leader is figuring out where they fit in. Don't give up on them. You might know what a wet blanket party is in the military, but it's really where we take a bar of soap and you put it in a sock and you wet the sock and then you hit people with it. And it's something they probably don't do anymore. They used to do it in boot camp when I went to boot camp many years ago. But the drill sergeants used to say something that always stuck with me because they instigated this stuff. They encouraged people. We came into the military not knowing how to beat up our peers. They taught you how to do that. But, people didn't get the wet blanket party for incompetence. They got the wet blanket for lack of motivation or being unwilling. So your team members, you know, everybody has strengths. You just got to figure out what they are and give them a chance. And that's your job as a leader. But if they're unwilling and unmotivated, help them change. If people don't change, I'm sure the people will change. You'll change the people. Trust is a leader's greatest attribute. It's probably the first thing you should do when you have a team is to inspire trust. And it's based on 4 things help inspire trust: your credibility and competence, your credibility, your competence, your respect, how well you show respect for others and if you respect yourself, and then finally, fairness. I'll tell you a story about trust in a minute. And the last one here around knowing is to manage up, down, and sideways. This took me a little while to learn because I was good at managing up in the military. I was good at managing down, but I didn't really have a lot of experience in managing my peers. I wasn't somebody people wanted to go out and have a beer with. You know, they would go out and do fun things, but nobody would ask me. And I think it was because I was always working or I wasn't a lot of fun. But I just didn't know back then I needed to invest in my own peers. One problem that arose as a result of that was I was a senior executive in a media company, and we were all meeting with the CEO, and I was the only female. And I was responsible for product and operations and other things. And we were in this room, we were planning an event, an event for our customers. And this one of my peers who led a different group, he talks about what he was going to do. Well, that ended up what he said he was going to do was my job. And so I said, excuse me, but that's my team's responsibility. And he says, oh yeah, I know. I just think I could do it better than you. And it just floored me. I couldn't believe that he was in front of everybody was going to just easily say that he was going to take my job. And I was looking around the room for people to stand up for me, but nobody did. I was fuming. I was so angry. And after that meeting, we had lunch, and then at 1 o'clock was our staff meeting with the CEO whom we all reported to. And so we got into the elevator, and I'm standing there and I'm so red and I feel it. And the guy looks at me and he says, they're like, hey, we're all going to lunch. Teresa, are you going to come? And I was like, no. And so the elevator goes down. I get out on the 2nd floor and I see the doors closing behind me. And I thought, oh shit, look what I just did. I let my emotions get the best of me. Those guys didn't care. I took it personally. They didn't take it personally. So I sat there at lunch and I thought, okay, I gotta make this right. So then at the staff meeting, I came in late because I was still a little flustered. There was a chair sitting next to this guy. I sat right next to him, and it was all I could do but look at him and say, hey guys, how was lunch? And that was a big lesson to me about self-management and about how sometimes we take things personally when we don't need to. It's also an example of managing sideways. So when selecting senior people, this is a test of trust I have. I call it my Foxhole Principle. A foxhole is something that, this is a picture here from the movie called Foxhole, coincidentally. And foxholes are things we build in this service to protect our position so we can hide from the enemy. And so you have to dig your own foxhole, and they're usually about shoulder height, so you can take your weapon and you're able to lean it up against and brace yourself so you can be steady with your weapon. And they're also about 2 feet or so wide because enemies love to throw hand grenades and foxholes and bunkers. And so you got to be able to quickly, if you see an incoming grenade, you got to be able to quickly turn around, drop down, get it, and throw it back out before it blows up. So that's a foxhole. So it's a place of trust. It's a very high anxiety place. And so I use this as a test of trust in terms of hiring people on my senior management team. And the test of trust is, would I want him in my foxhole? And the first one is, can he manage himself? Can he manage his own emotions? Is he going to panic under stress and jump up and give out our position and the enemy knows where we are and they shoot us? Or the second one is he honorable? Will he, in fact, when the going gets rough, I go out, will he cover me or will he shoot me in the back? When people aren't looking, does he have my back? And those are the 2 things I use when I think about trust. In fact, when I was leaving another company, a media company, I had an exit interview with one of the C-level, and he said to me, we were talking about, he used to call me Colonel, and we were talking about some people, and he said, "Hey, you don't like this guy, do you? I've always wondered, why don't you like him?" And I said, "You know, it's not a matter of like for me. It's a matter of trust. I wouldn't want him in my foxhole." And I shared with him my Foxhole Principle. And the irony of it is, and he just kind of laughed, but the irony of it is that same individual wrote something and published it, and it led to the demise of the C-level executive at that company. So it's something that's worked for me a lot, and you know, you might want to think about if it might work for you too. I want to share with you two tricks about understanding your team. The first one is, it corresponds a little bit to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in that if we're not safe and secure, if we can't take care of ourselves and our team members at the basic level, you know, you're not gonna have higher actualization or other other sorts of satisfaction and gratification. So there are things in life called distractors and motivators. If your team member is experiencing a distractor, meaning, and a lot of us have distractors right now given the environment, but if somebody in their family is sick, if they are worried about money and being able to feed their family, if addiction is a problem, or they have something that's going on in their life that's a major distractor, if they just had a baby, might be a good thing, but if it's a major distractor, no matter what you do, until you can help them remove that distractor, you will never be able to motivate them, right? It's a big distractor. So productivity and motivation only happens after those big things go away in their lives. And then motivating them, you want to motivate them, as I mentioned before, intrinsically. You don't want to just give them an attaboy all the time. You want them to want to do the job for themselves and for their team members. The second tip I'll share is what I call the pyramid of change. If you have people around you who are both your peers, as well as could be your bosses, or it could be, you know, people on your team, if you're not getting the results that you want, you might want to think about this. So I believe that it is our experiences that shape our beliefs, which drive our actions to produce results. You know, we've all had managers who say, next time, just believe me. Believe me, next time I'll get you that pay raise. Next time, I'm not going to let engineering come in here and push us around, or let product come in here. Next time I'm going to do this. Believe me, believe me, believe me. And you know, those people will never believe you until they have a new experience of you, because their experience of you is when it comes time for that pay raise, you forget about it. Or when it comes time if you're a pushover and you're not sticking up for them, they're not going to believe you. So they're not going to change their actions. We've also had bosses who are micromanagers, or they are, you know, they're kind of very authoritative. They just, you know, do this, do that, do this, do that. And they come into meetings and they just tell you what to do all the time. And so, you know, it's funny, those kinds of people are ones that when you go into a staff meeting or have a meeting and everybody, I want you to do this and do that and do this and do that. Everybody nods their head. Okay, yep, we got it. And then they leave and nobody does it. Well, it's because they don't believe you and their actions aren't aligned, and you're trying to tell them what to do. You're trying to force your team to have a different action. Well, they're not going to take a different action, just like they're not going to hold a different belief until they have a new experience of you. So you want to think about going back to this B and being aware and being self-aware. What is my team's experience of me? And how can I improve that, or how can I change that so that I might be able to shape their belief to drive different actions to produce different results? So the last one is do, and that is about empowering others. It's important that we delegate authority with responsibility. A lot of times we see people who delegate responsibility, but they don't have any authority. And if they have no authority, then you can't hold them accountable. The military is a values-based organization, and it's founded on servant leadership. The servant leadership creates the accountability. Servant leadership isn't wimpy. It means that we serve others. When we join the service, and you see people who have been in politics or government or whatnot, and they've made a life of service, it's about putting other people's needs above yours, not their wants, but their needs, and knowing what they need and helping them so that they can then rise up and deliver because they want to, not because you told them to. It's important as a leader to set high standards, not high expectations. And this is something I also have to check myself on, because I have very high expectations for myself, and I sometimes project those onto my team. But I'm mindful that it needs to be high standards. Now, the difference is that a standard is about a quality. It's about a benchmark. It's not personal. And you hold everybody to that same standard. And you say, this is what I expect. This is what our team expects. This is what our organization, this is what our clients expect. And so it's a benchmark for quality. If instead you have high expectations and you make it personal, then it becomes, I'm expecting this of you. You need to deliver this. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And then people, most of the time, they'll shut down because it reminds them of their parents. It reminds them of other authority figures in their life whom they've never been able to please or to satisfy. So it's really important. Most effective leaders, or all effective leaders and great leaders, they know the difference between setting high standards setting high standards, but not setting expectations. Remember that it's not what you do, but it's how you made them feel. And so I'm sure you've heard the phrase that people will not remember what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And so not too long ago, I guess it's been a couple years ago or so, I met somebody through one of my kids' fathers, and he said, we were at a soccer game or something, and he said, hey, I met somebody on your team. And he was talking about what you guys were doing, and he was saying it was great. And I said, oh, really? Who was that? And he mentioned the name, and I said, he's not on my team. And he said, oh, I must have gotten that wrong. And so then he came back later, and I thought, he must have gotten it wrong. He came back later, and he said, no, I did. I asked him if he was on your team, and he said, oh, no, he wasn't on your team. He wasn't even in your company, but he's worked with you on a lot of projects, and it's your energy that he's attracted to. And that when he's around you and when you're leading something, he feels like he can do anything. And I thought, wow, that just made me feel really, really good, because, we do attract followers. What we put out there, people are attracted to. So it's not something, leadership isn't about directing and doing something. It's about influencing people. And so it's about what you give off and the time that you take to understand who they are. And they will want to serve you. They will want to succeed with you. We have in our team what we call celebrate success with no surprises. And what that means is that when you're leading a team, you want to communicate and be transparent, because only then, if something comes up, you're not going to be successful, right? But if you communicate and you're not surprised, then you can mitigate and you can course correct, right? And so you course correct, so then at the end of the day, you'll celebrate. And so over the years, I don't know how many people have figured out that I do this, but we set a goal in the beginning. At the end of the project, we have a very different goal, but we're still celebrating success. And the reason is because, we have communicated along the way. We've removed the obstacles and mitigated the risk. We've helped each other out. We've been transparent and clear about each other's roles, and so that we can celebrate success. Confidence is really important in a team, and helping your team achieve those milestones will allow them to over time, gain more confidence and be able to learn more and to take on more responsibility. So great leaders are the difference. If you become the leader you seek, others will seek that leader in you. And so my advice is that if you be aware and honest, be bold and brave, be grateful and kind, but above all, just be yourself. And as some people said, my mother used to say, be yourself because everyone else is already taken. I think a lot of people say that, but it's true. Just be yourself. If you can be your authentic self, if you know who you are, you can be your authentic self, then you're not threatened by people who might be smarter, people who might make more money, people who might have gone to a better school. You will take comfort and pride in knowing what you know and who you are. And you can make good decisions as you go through your career. And you'll feel good about yourself for those decisions. We certainly all have, you know, in hindsight, we all have things we may have done differently if we had a do-over. I try not to have regrets because I try to be mindful about the decisions and my behavior in the moment. But we all do things and say things that I think I kick myself and say, that was really dumb, or why did I do that? Why did I say that? And I go back and apologize if I can, or I try to make things right. But if we are mindful of that, and we know that we're not perfect, then we can help our teams find the best in themselves and help them reach the potential. And if you can do that for yourself and be kind to yourself and do that, then you will become the leader that you're looking for, and others will be attracted to that in you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teresa. That was fantastic. I'm actually really personally glad that we are recording the session, because I'm going to go back and watch that again. Some really incredible pieces of wisdom from you. Thank you so much. And I think it's incredible the experience that you had working in the military with General Galvin. That's phenomenal. We did have a couple of questions, and since there's a little bit of time, I thought maybe we could bring them up. So here's a question from Alex Washington, and it has to do with change. And change is something that you know, we all have to go through, we have to deal with, and often it can be kind of scary when it's you know, unexpected and it's taking us into new territory. And the question is, what are some ways that you can understand or accept change when it does seem scary and it's, you know, you're really unsure about, is this really the right direction that maybe we're being led into?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that question. So there's two types of change, right? There's transitional change and transformational change. And transitional change is like building a bridge from point A to point B, where you take steps forward, but you can always at any point in time abort your mission and you can go back to point A, right? So you're transitioning over time. Transformational change is like taking a boat. So you're getting in your boat and you're going to a distant shore, and you might not be able to go back to plan A. So those are two very different types. As a leader, depending upon the objective and what you're doing, you have different ways of communicating and setting up your team. But let me just talk about it kind of broadly. So the most important thing in change is helping people understand what that change means to them, the why, the purpose of it. Because if people don't understand what it means to them, they're not going to buy into it. If they don't buy into it, they're going to go through the motions and do what you ask them to do, but they're never going to be fully on board, and in which case that change won't stick. And so we oftentimes see, you know, just as an example, consultants coming in, and consultants tend to do these things to us in organizations. They'll come in and they'll create this big change program, and then they'll, you know, everybody will have a role and we'll do some things, and then they leave and it all unfolds. Well, the reason is because two reasons primarily. One is that change was not spearheaded at the top. It did not have executive sponsorship, and that change did not get communicated from the executive down to his or her lieutenants, and so that everybody understands both where we are, but where we're going and how we're going to get there. And most importantly, the people, what it means to them, what their role is in this change, and why it's important to them. If you do those two things, have executive sponsorship, articulate why it's important and everybody's individual roles and responsibilities, and track against that to keep people on board and in step, you'll get where you're going.
That's super helpful. And you know, one of the things that you kept stressing when you were answering that question was help people understand why it's important to them, not just important. And you know, I think that's something that it's easy to miss. You know, this is important to me. This is important to the organization. This is important to the company. It's important to our customers. Well, why is it important to them? So that's really a great point. Another question This is from Patricia Mayer. What is the most powerful lesson you have learned from one of your followers? That's an interesting question. Thanks, Teresa. Patricia?
Well, I learn, so I don't consider them followers, first of all, right? So they're team members, and they might just be at a different point in their careers, and they might be in a different place. So only, messiahs, if you will, have followers, right? So it also goes back to people don't follow me, they follow a vision, and what we stand for as a company and as a culture and our mission, right? But I learn from people every single day, right? I learned, as I mentioned, the person who helped me keep my own perfectionism in check. I've learned from, people who don't move as fast as I think they don't operate the same way that I do. I just approach everything with a lot of passion and gusto, and I want to see it, I want to see us moving. And sometimes people are passionate inwardly, right? They don't express themselves in the same way. And that's an interesting thing around, let me just speak about culture here too, which we're all in Silicon Valley, or not all in Silicon Valley, but one thing with working with so many different cultures, we're all unique in terms of, both in terms of our, our culture, but our families and our role in the families and how we're raised, but also how we express ourselves, the display of that expression and emotion, and, how we interact with authority. And so I'm somebody that wants that good, hearty feedback. I want people to challenge me. I want people to tell me, and believe me, I do. My staff and team members, they do tell me. I was on a call the other day, and I try to remember most things, but I was on a call and there were 4 of them, and they were reminding me that I had signed off on an email a couple of months ago, and I had forgotten about it. And so I quickly thought, okay, there's 4 of them. I can't pull any wool over their eyes here. So I just said, okay, which Teresa showed up to that meeting and made a joke out of it, because I know there's 3 of us, right? There's always 3 of us. There's who we are, there's who we think we are, and there's who's other people perceive us to be, right? And so I kind of joke about that. But I have learned more about myself from my team members than I have in my own reflection.
Yeah, I think that if we all think about that, I think that's probably true for everyone. Let's do one more question, and this pertains to COVID. So what are the changes you, Teresa, as a leader, are focusing on during the pandemic? How do you approach the future business needs post-COVID era?
Well, I don't think that I don't think this is the new normal. I think we're kind of in this middle stage, and I think that the new normal will emerge. A couple of things. We know that people are leaving especially Silicon Valley. They're moving out. They're realizing that it's a lot less expensive. And I think there's going to be repercussions there. I think these companies are now going to realize, that maybe they don't need quite as many managers perhaps, or they can restructure their teams differently. Now that you're all remote, you don't make some things easier and some things harder. And so I think we'll see teams organize and companies organize differently in terms of how goals are communicated and how teams are aligned and how progress gets reported against. And we see some of that ourselves, right, in our own company. So that's kind of one. I think we're in the middle, like I said, of before we settle in on the new normal. The other thing is that, it is harder. I've heard from many people, including myself, that we work more now. Now that we're fully distributed, we've got people on the East Coast, people, in other countries, and it's just they want to start conference calls, 7 in the morning, and you don't end until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And so, whereas before it made it easier a little bit to kind of compartmentalize, those of us who have kids and school starting, it's really, really difficult. So I think we're going to see also a lot more emphasis, I hope, on your whole self and being able to, for mental illness and helping people, because I think we're going to go through a period of people are going to lose touch and they're going to feel isolated or disconnected or sad and depressed. And so I hope that we as an industry can place emphasis on that, and we can help co-create the new normal where we can have distributed teams, but we don't lose that connection with one another, so we can help support each other in the process.
Yeah, it's so easy to do. I think once you kind of get the idea that you're working from home and your family's there with you, and it just seems so normal to work all the time. Like I'm working while I'm making dinner, and then I eat dinner, and then I work some more, and maybe hang out with the family a little bit, and then work some more, and it really never stops.
Right.
You never really stop having access to all of the resources really that you need to do work, because it's all kind of right there, and everybody else is in the same boat. So we are at time here, and once again I really want to thank Teresa. Fabulous presentation. If you have a chance, go check it out again if you'd like. It's going to be on the OTT.X YouTube channel, and we'll have it up there in a few days. So once again, thank you, Teresa.